This video is sponsored by The Little Book of Unholy Questions by me, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. What a wonderful book of 501 very insightful and incisive questions that I asked God. And so far, after all these years of having written a book, she hasn't answered any of them. So I'm quite disappointed, but that doesn't stop it being a remarkably good book. So please grab yourself a copy. The Little Book of Unholy Questions, where I ask God lots of questions under different topics, such as heaven, hell, Jesus, the resurrection, the Bible, prayer, and so on and so forth. And yeah, it's a very fulfilling read. Hello and welcome to another Tippling Philosopher video. Today I'm going to speak to you about the US elections, and we are in an odd period now of something like 16 days after the election there, and it's still being contested. I mean, Biden's won obviously, but Trump has not taken it very well. He's not a good loser. In fact, calling him a loser is almost hilariously akin to taking the mickey out of a child who has lost a game, lost a board game or something, or a sporting game. It's just the petulance and the incapability of taking defeat and not seeing him as a massive winner, means that he's reacting the way he is. So the interesting scenario is Georgia now. Georgia is key because Biden absolutely romped nationally the election. I mean, 18 million votes. Just as the final counts are coming through from all these different states, it's obvious that nationally he absolutely thrashed Trump. But it was close because of the first past the post system of the Electoral College, means that it was closer than you would think from the national vote share. It's because places like California are just hugely democratic and massively populous. So you get an awful lot of votes going to Biden, but in some sense they're wasted because you really want those votes in places like, ideally North Carolina and some of these places that didn't quite go to Biden, but that could have done. Texas could have done with a good few million from California. So it ended up being close. And also what happened was down ballot. So you have your president, then you have your senators and House of Representatives and the state legislatures and what have you, that you vote for people in those positions further down. And where Biden romped it because he attracted an awful lot of never-Trumpers or Republicans who are fed up with Biden and switched the top of the ticket, fed up with Trump, and switched at the top of the ticket from Republican to Democrat. They weren't really switching party, they were switching presidential nominee because these are presidential elections, which are very personality based. So you'll have Republicans voting for Biden, but then splitting their ballot and voting for Republicans right down the ballot. So actually Republicans did really well. They didn't really have any Senate positions flipped. I mean, they exchanged, but they didn't lose any senators really, and in fact they gained in the House of Representatives. So Congress is looking better for them than they could have imagined, I think. And what it comes down to, because you have a situation where if neither candidate reaches 50% of the votes, because there are multiple candidates, not just Democrat and Republican, in Georgia, then they go to a runoff in January. So both Senate races have gone to a runoff in January. So we have Reverend Warnock against Loeffler, who is the richest woman, I think, running anywhere. I mean, her family literally own the New York Stock Exchange. They own the stock exchange. So, and then you have Ossoff against Perdue. And Loeffler and Perdue are classic Trumpian Republican candidates. So, if we look back in history and see where a Democratic president has won the election to become president, and Georgia goes to a runoff for their senators, even though the Democrat wins the presidential election, those runoffs go to, or have gone to, Republicans, to the GOP. So we can really expect the same to happen again, all things remaining equal, which is to say that traditionally Democrats drop off after the presidential election, where they get really motivated and up for it, but they don't bother so much a few months later or in the midterms and get spanked in the midterms. In this case, you would expect them to lose the Senate races for the runoffs, also because they lost by sort of 1, 2, 3% in either of the races already. Okay, so where let's think where the Democrats won for Biden in Georgia. They won on mobilising that basic grassroots work of Stacey Abrams and loads of organisations and people who have just been magnificent in mobilising and motivating the black vote, the first-time voters, the suburbs of Atlanta and places. So it really increased the turnout, which is what Democrats always need, an increased turnout. The question is, can they maintain that for the runoffs? They also got the people who switched from the Republicans to the Democrats for the presidential ticket. And those are people who would probably mainly switch back in the next presidential election when it's not Trump against Biden. You know, they'll probably continue to be Republican voters. So the question is, for the runoffs, will Ossoff and Warnock be able to continue to get that mobilised grassroots voting a couple of months later when the presidential elections are out of people's minds? And will they be able to get those never-Trumpers who moved over to vote for Biden? Well, actually, they didn't get them in the November the 3rd election anyway, because they split their ballots. So you can forget them, because they're not going to vote for Ossoff and Warnock. Let's face it, they are maybe never-Trumpers, but they're Republicans otherwise, and they will vote for the Conservative Senate candidate over the Liberal one. So they're not going to get them. They're down 1 to 3%, as according to the ballots that they got on November the 3rd. So in January, can they catch up the 1 to 3% by mobilising all the people they got to come out on November the 3rd and then finding some more? Now, what they're really hoping for are people who turn 18 in between sort of November and January. So there are some people, there are quite a number of people who will be eligible to vote, and actually the younger you are, the more likely you are to vote Liberal. So that's definitely something they'll be looking to do. And they will need to just make sure those people who turned up before turned up again. Will they do that? Well, the past, if you use inductive reasoning, then, you know, on past evidence, that's going to be a tall order. But this has been a really crazy election where people have been totally mobilised and motivated to vote on both sides of the aisle, right? And that could be a problem. Oh, that's a nice pint. Because let's face it, the Republicans, well, Trump garnered the second highest vote tally in history of US politics. Biden absolutely slammed it with 80 million, but Trump did really well. They're both motivated and mobilised and enthused their bases. So it's going to be fascinating, because so much money is going to be thrown at Georgia from both sides, absolutely without doubt. I mean, not only is, for example, Loeffler particularly rich and has a bunch of money, Republicans are opening their wallets, and I think it's Karl Rove who said, you know, open your pocketbook now because it'll save you from opening it later, you know, to a conservative donor. As in, you get in the right people now, you'll save money in tax breaks for the rich later and stuff like that. So, you know, let's face it, the GOP are not going to, or these two GOP Senate nominees are not going to be appealing to the working class. So it really is important that if the working class wants representation, that they get Ossoff and Warnock in. I mean, you know, and they've got a lot of positivity going for them, because at the moment the Republicans are doing their negative attack ads, even on Warnock, who's a reverend of the same church as Martin Luther King. So there's a lot of really positive, so not only policy but personality and moral fibre that these guys can bring to the table, that I don't think Perdue and Loeffler could even remotely harness, but that doesn't matter to their electoral base, right? It's all about, you know, pro-life, Second Amendment advocacy, religion, yada yada yada. You know, you tick those boxes, which is why Warnock could be an interesting one on the religion front. But the whole point of what I'm trying to say is that they have a chance, the Democrats in Georgia. They need it because at 48-50, they are 2 down in the Senate. And without these 2 senators, they will be under the power of Mitch McConnell as Senate Majority Leader for the Republicans, and the Democrats won't be able to pass any bills. He's already said he's going to, you know, put a spanner in the works as far as, you know, cabinet nominees go. So he's not going to play ball. There's not going to be bipartisan, you know, collegiate working and agreements in Congress. So it's absolutely fundamental the Democrats win this. I just think it's quite unlikely, because they not only have to make up the gap that they lost out in the election on the 3rd of November for those Senate head-to-head races. They're not going to have to not only make that up, but they are going to have to get every single person who voted for them before to vote again. Now, as I said, translating the Biden vote to the Senate vote will not work. They're going to have to work with what they got in the Senate, because the Biden vote captured the Never Trumpers, as I said, and they are not going to translate down to the Senate race for the Democrats. And so really what they had on the 3rd of November is what they've got to work with, and then they've got to make sure that they get a greater turnout than the Republicans. And that's tough. It is tough, and it will be tough. I don't know that they'll do it, but do you know what? I hope they do. Of course I hope they do, as a Liberal. But, you know, it's incredible how the Georgia race affects America as a nation, and then it actually therefore affects the world. It's a super important piece of electoral history, I think, in the making. So I don't know if you have any ideas of how the Democrats can mobilise. You know, they're going to be using all the same people and organisations and grassroots activism that they did before, and they're going to have to turn it up to 11, right? Can they do it? Can they get a greater turnout than the Republicans? Well, if you look at the fervent base that the Republicans have still, with people turning out to support Trump at rallies, at sort of marches here and there, and you think, goodness me, he's still got a huge amount of support. The conspiracy theories going round, and it's just incredible. But then you think, are they just people who are shouting loudly? Are the actual people on the ground in Georgia, are they going to be a bit fatigued about it? Can we hope that the Republicans, some of the Republicans won't turn up to vote? They won't be as enthused as the Democrats? I don't know. It'd be interesting to see, you know, what the polls do and what the data looks like. But yeah, good luck to the Dems. Anyway, just thought I'd talk to you about US politics. Far be it from me, a British person, to think that you can do that. But I have done so. You know, get over it. Question everything. Check out my blog at A Tippling Philosopher, and please buy my merchandise or any books from links down below, and like, subscribe, and all that kind of rubbish. As ever, thank you. See you later.